thank you all so much for coming, and we apologize for starting a bit late. The previous session went on longer than we expected, but we're here now and we have our panelists and everything is ready, so I think it's due time we start. Just before I start, some housekeeping is I would just like to remind you of Dr. Faham's comment yesterday about the mobiles, because I will be looking forward to collecting 10 pounds and dollars and euros from everyone in the audience. So it would be great if you can please turn them to silent. Otherwise, I'll just go very quickly on what we have, what the session we have planned out is for you. Basically, this is a roundtable discussion, which in short means that you as the audience are as much a part of this session as the panelists. So what we wanted to do is that we have quite a few speakers from very diverse and really exciting backgrounds, and they will share their perspectives on a theme. And we would very much like to have a longer than normal Q&A session at the end where we can hear your opinions, your feedbacks, and if you have any questions for our panelists, that would be great as well. So without further delay, today has been, I mean, if you have been throughout the several sessions we had today, it's been quite exciting. There's been some very diverse topics opened, everything ranging from education, the problems, the challenges, the opportunities, how to reform, what needs to be done in this part of the world and other parts of the world, the success stories we've heard from other places. We've had discussions of philosophy. If you've been in the session just before this, the main discussion was what is conscious and are we conscious or not, and can we define consciousness through science or philosophy or spirituality and religion. So it's been quite interesting and quite diverse. And what's really interesting with this session is we're bringing everyone from all those different backgrounds together and basically focusing. This general theme that we have is about science communication through the different forms of science communication. So that can be through science education, which is one of the themes that have been quite heavy in the conference this year. But it also touches on media and science media and the role of science media and how that can change, and how media and education can come together as well. And we would also like to discuss outreach efforts, science outreach, how that can be done, and maybe the crossroads between science and different disciplines such as philosophy and even politics, if you would say. And the role that this science communication, this umbrella of the different forms that we transmit science to each other will play in the future, and especially for younger generations. So without going into any further long talks, I would like to start our first panelist to come to the podium, and she is Katia Shalita from Brazil, who's a science journalist and communicator, science and culture, and a TV anchor and a scriptwriter. And she will talk about her experience with a TV show about science. So, Katia, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mohammed.
I think we have a laser pointer here if you need one.
Thank you. Thank you. And the change, I will here.
Just press here.
Only this?
To forward and just to back.
Okay. So I would like to thank the Biblioteca Alexandrina Biovision Alexandria for inviting me to this fantastic conference where so many subjects of so much importance are discussed. And I'm talking in this panel about science, communication, innovation, and education, a multiple perspective. The perspective I would like to show you is about media productions for science education. I work in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I have worked and I still work in an enterprise named Multi-Rio that is founded in 1993 in Rio de Janeiro. It's funded by Rio de Janeiro City Government is a multimedia enterprise from Rio de Janeiro City Government. It produces, Multirio produces materials in different medias for the public school system. It's a huge public school system with more than 1,500 schools, 675,000 students, and 42,000 professors. So it's really a big, big, big network. And Multirio produces material in media education for this huge network. And the domains, the areas where Multirio produces, the productions are about education, culture, internet and media, youth and parenthood, citizenship, sports, environment, health, science and technologies. It means the matters, the subjects are all those that interest the youth, their parents, the children, and everybody that is interested in formation and education of our society. And in the matter, what interests us now in this auditorium, in this Congress, is about sciences. And one of the productions, there are many, many productions, but one of the productions is named Detective of Sciences. It's the story, it's a series with 10 episodes, the story of two curious and smart adolescents, as you see here, Peter and Sophia, who try to unravel the mysteries of sciences present in everyday life. They have about 14 years. They are 14 years old, the two, Peter and Sophia. And the scientific issues are presented in a pleasant and intriguing form, dealing with the relation between science and daily experiences. The two the two adolescents, they have about 14 years, you'll see in the video. And every day, in every episode, they have something strange and something, a mystery that must be resolved in their everyday life. And this is a dramaturgical TV series addressed, as I said, to students from 10 years old to 15 years old. The script is written by a professional script writer with science, with the help, with the support of science professors. There are control groups feedback, with students, teachers, school coordinators. They meet after the episode is ready. They meet with the students, their professors, to see if everything is okay, if really they understand, if this product was really made for them, if they recognize themselves in this product. And this is very important, with the support of an institute, a Brazilian institute named Instituto Ciência Hoje, translated into English, Today's Science Institute. It's a non-profit organization that prepares content and publications and develops projects of scientific disclosure to support and enhance science education. Ciência Hoje this institute has already 30 years. First of all, 30 years ago, they were supposed to create publications for young people, for adults, but now, more than this, they make the support to activities, to science formation, to science in school, and for science education, to enhance science education in general. So there was a problem when Multirio created this series, Detective of Sciences. There was a problem. Teachers did not know how to use. It's an excellent series. You'll see they received many prizes, but teachers didn't know how to use this series, how to use efficiently the series in their classes. And Multirio had to help them, because Multirio was created to make the support to the network, to the public schools, the public school network in Rio de Janeiro. So how to help these teachers to use this product that was made to help them in their classes. And the solution was to create another series named Ideas and Ways. It's a TV series made to be shown in web TV and in open TV too. In this series, and that's where I am situated, this series is to prepare the professors, is to show the professors, the teachers, how to use this series in their classes. Activities, possibilities, suggestions to use in their classes. And the conception was, as I said, to develop the use of the TV series, showing the various possibilities and activities to be led by the professor with their students. And that's what I will show you now, compact of this program. It has about 25 minutes, but here we'll see 4 or 5 minutes to have an idea of this program, one episode of this series. Olá, professor. A curiosidade pelos mistérios do universo e pelos fatos e fenômenos que ocorrem no nosso dia a dia intriga crianças e jovens há mais tempo do que se imagina. De onde viemos? Do que são feitas as estrelas? Como se formam as tempestades? Por que alguns filhos se parecem muito com os pais e outros nem tanto? Indagações que hoje encontram resposta na ciência, graças ao seu avanço e ao emprego de um método para responder às perguntas. Para ajudar a reforçar o ensino de ciências, com base nas orientações curriculares da SME, a Multirio produziu, com a consultoria do Instituto Ciência Hoje, a série Detetives da Ciência, que aborda os conteúdos de ciências para alunos do 6º ao 9º ano do ensino fundamental. Assista agora ao episódio Nanomundo e descubra as diversas possibilidades para trabalhar o tema da nanotecnologia em sala de aula.
Chamou?
Que susto! Como é que você já chegou?
Saca a velocidade da luz? Então,
Isso não é o nosso tema de hoje. Vamos lá embaixo que eu quero te mostrar uma coisa muito legal. Corre! Vem. Tcharam! Olha aqui.
tá, e aí? O que tem?
Ué, você não tá vendo? Olha essas microagulhas, cada uma com uma linha colorida. Minha mãe ficou ontem à noite preparando essas microagulhas para consertar esse microtapete. Ah, e ela deu para elas um nome muito fofo. Minhas nanoagulhas.
Que cheiro é esse?
É o 513 da Show, gostou? Muito bom, né?
Eu sou meio alérgico ao perfume.
Meu Deus, olha o que você fez, Pedro!
Não fui eu, foi o perfume.
Chuto.
É a minha alergia, você sabe, eu sou muito
E
alérgico.
agora, minha mãe me mata.
É só comprar mais ali na esquina.
Ah, você não tá entendendo. Você acha que eu te chamei aqui pra ver mais agulhinhas que se compram na esquina? Elas chegaram ontem por Federotex, da Esboslávia. Sei lá, ela queria terminar esse troço hoje.
Calma, calma. Vamos procurar.
O principal objetivo deste programa é possibilitar a percepção pelo aluno de que a nanotecnologia é uma ciência que já faz parte do nosso dia a dia há muito tempo, mesmo que não tenhamos consciência dela. Um mundo que os nossos olhos não veem, das nanomáquinas, dos nanomotores, dos nanocomponentes, que possibilitam o surgimento de aparelhos cada vez menores e, ao mesmo tempo, mais duráveis, limpos, seguros e inteligentes, com aplicação em várias áreas: comunicações, transportes, agricultura, medicina, meio ambiente. Por tudo isso, é um tema fundamental a ser trabalhado na escola. Veja algumas ideias para você usar o vídeo na sala de aula. Você pode relembrar e listar, junto com seus alunos, diferentes produtos e aparelhos presentes no dia a dia que utilizam a nanotecnologia: celulares, televisores de tela plana, iPods, lentes de óculos, secadores de cabelo e outros.
Pois é, né? Quem não se amarra no MP3? Mas ninguém para pra pensar como é possível colocar 4.000 músicas na palma da mão.
Pra você ter uma ideia, uma cabeça de alfinete mede 1 milhão de nanômetros.
E uma agulha que não tem cabeça? Bota aí.
E um simples fio de cabelo tem a espessura de 25.400 nanômetros. Alguns cientistas acreditam que se a Terra fosse colocada em escala nanométrica e se fosse dividida por 1 bilhão, ela seria do tamanho de uma bola de gude.
Eu não acho nada confortável morar numa bola de gude.
Ué, depende do seu tamanho. Se você fosse um nano, garoto, a bola de gude ia ser ideal para sua nano existência.
Ah, falar é fácil, mas pensar nessa nanoescala é sinistro.
Uma forma de entender esse funcionamento é oferecer blocos de montagem e deixar que os alunos construam figuras livremente. Após a observação das diferentes formas, sugira que as peças sejam imaginadas como átomo e assim se verifiquem as várias possibilidades de construção com elas. Se esse processo for pensado numa escala microscópica, será possível compreender então como transformar o átomo em um produto maior.
Olha, não é incrível?
Que máximo! Você já sabia disso?
Elementar, minha cara Sofia. Agulhas são metais magnéticos. E metal magnético atrai metal magnético.
Ah, é? Por que você não falou isso antes?
Estudar é investigar, pesquisar e descobrir. Junte-se a nós e seja você também um detetive da ciência!
Encontro. So, okay, just the conclusion, okay? We have, okay. No, about the prizes, this series, TV series has been awarded with the prize Best TV Program in the category Fiction in the International Film Festival of Nueva Mirada in Argentina for children and youth. The first prize in the category TV series in Colibri, the Audiovisual International Festival for Children and Adolescents in Bolivia in 2011, the two in 2011. But just to show you, and now our conclusion, to show you what you saw here is the result of a long and tenacious work since the original conception of a video series, that's normal in every video series, to teach sciences to teenagers, throughout the effective use by professors in their classroom. And at the end of every program, we tell the professor, the teachers, if they have other ideas, because we have many, many other ideas. If they have other ideas, they send us, and we can share with the other professors, the other teachers in our network. Thank you, and now, if you have any questions and inquiries, we can answer at the end of the panel, okay?
Yes, thank you, Katya. If we can carry on with the theme of education. All right. So our next speaker is. Okay. Okay. Our next speaker is Claudio Carlon, who is a senior professional specialized in communication management and strategic advisory services, and he will talk about his vision of how education can be reformed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all. What I'm going to say is highly provocative. And please don't think I'm a conservative, which I am not. But we will, I decided to entitle my small, it's a very short presentation, School versus Science, in the sense of what future for education in science. So now let's get back to half a century ago, which means the 60s, and let's try and take some lesson from the past. It may look prehistoric, but I'm still here, so it's not a long time, such a long time ago. So this was the way we were, and what education meant for us. This is my telephone. It was screwed on the wall. TV set, which many of you probably know. This was our car, my family. Was it a car? Nowadays we can tell it. And this was my refrigerator. It was so difficult to keep cool in a house, and we need to buy some ice cubes that they cut and they deliver home. in a refrigerator, which was a modern piece of furniture. And at school, we read to learn and exercise the mind. Learning by heart was our brain gym. My teacher in Italian literature asked us to learn and to learn by heart the Divina Commedia of Dante Alighieri, which was absolutely useful for the rest of my life because I have a very, very, very good memory. So now, instead, kids learn to read, which are absolutely different. And in the 60s, expenditure in education has been about 1/3 than today, but the overall knowledge was growing at an exponential rate. And it was doubling every 7 years, which was not bad. This is the computer I used for my degree. I was a former chemical engineer, and it was 1976, the UNIVAC 1101, which was a machine as large as the same that Dr. Sarah Galdin showed yesterday in his presentation. And it took, to me, to punch more than 3,000 of that cards for the program I needed, to run the program I needed for my project. Just a couple of years later, the cards were replaced by ribbons, but it was almost the same. In the same years, Mr. Gates and Mr. Jobs were starting their long run. So now, while supercomputers can manage hundreds and hundreds of petabytes, as we know, scientific literacy grows up. And kids always use a calculator and often ignore Pythagoras' multiplication table, as many of you probably know, or many of you probably use, depends. What's happening to education? The latest program for international students assessment, called PISA, stated the situation which is not so good. The OECD, since 2000, the year 2000, has attempted to evaluate the knowledge and the skill of people of 15 years old across the world. And more than 500,000 students in 65 economics took part in the latest test, which was in math, reading, and science, with the main focus on these three issues. Because maths in particular is considered as a strong predictor of participation in post-secondary education and future success. So the question is, what's happening to education in OECD countries? Because this is the ranking. You see Shanghai, China, in maths, reading, science, first in ranking. Singapore, almost second in maths, third in reading, third in science, and so on. Hong Kong, Taiwan, Korea, Macau, Japan, Liechtenstein. No? Asian countries outperform the rest of the world, according to OECD, with Shanghai, Singapore, Hong Kong, etc. And the students in Shanghai perform so well in maths that the OECD report compares their scoring to the equivalent of nearly 3 years of schooling above most OECD countries. This is the situation. You can see the United States, the first in ranking for the OECD countries, Finland, 12th, and the United States are 36th. The other, you can see here, this is the complete ranking. France is 46th, and most of them, the OECD average, see every country, mostly below. So, how do they succeed? No, first of all, let's just have a look at this very shortly. This is a report in the year 2002, and the next one is in 2012, the latest. What is very important is in 8 out of 22 OECD countries, expenditure on educational institution per tertiary student decreased between 95 and 2000, whereas GDP per capita increased. That means it was not a crisis. It was not an economic factor. GDP per capita increased, but a lot of countries included in the OECD decided to lower the expenditure in education. That was in 2012. In 2012, of course, we had a crisis, but the situation is already not so good. For example, in the OECD countries, the expenditure is approximately 9,000 US dollar per student. But the expenditure, 2009 and 2010, investment in education fell in around 1/3 OECD countries, which is political again. This is the complete ranking, but it doesn't matter. This is a cultural defeat for Western countries. But instead of rising quality, as we know, many countries have lowered the grade, reducing school programs or duration of courses. So the question I'm asking now is, how do they make it, Chinese and Japanese and so on? The answer is they made the same way we did in the 60s, which means studying and studying and studying. More studying and less creative than we imagine and than we used to do now. According to President Obama, which was astonished by the US results, the ranking of the US, 36th, he declared, the nation that out-educates us today is going to out-compete tomorrow. It is quite evident. And as George Clooney would say, what else? This is it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Claudio. Well, to, I would say, really wrap up our education angle of the panel today, please, Professor Sharif Andil, who is the professor in Alexandria University, will briefly talk about an experiment he was involved in reform of education here in Egypt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is to share with you an experiment which has been conducted here in Egypt on creative science education. And this took place within the framework of the Egyptian Education Reform Program, which took place between the years 2005 to 2010. And this particular program was connected to the international equip program. equip is Education Quality Improvement Program. And this works on all levels. This works on the school level until it goes up to the national level and the ministerial level. And it had two components. One of them was concentrating on the school level, and is called the Equip 1 or E1, and the other one starting from the policy and systems. And this is starting, and it was called E2. And the E1 and the E2 programs, both of them were helping into putting a national strategy or giving input to the national strategy at that time was prepared to reform the education system. Simply, it was needed to get the experiment from the bottom and go up, and then get the decisions or the policy reforms, sort of from up and then go down there. The National Strategy for Education Reform, it was prepared for 5 years to take place between the years 2007, 8 until 2012-13. And that was actually done by so many experts who were involved, international experience, sort of gotten that. And there was one particular name should be mentioned here, Dr. Hassan Billawi, who, sort of mastered the whole work from the Ministry of Education, and all of that was during the time of Dr. Yusri al-Gamal as the Minister of Education at the time. And this actually, on the other hand, went through the United Nations Decade on Education for Sustainable Development, the ESD, which took place between the years 2005 until 2014. So we are almost now at the final year for the decade, which was Education for Sustainable Development. And from that, we got the creative science education, and it was simply based on a number of small stories, very short stories. The short stories, there were 36 short stories. Most of them, sort of was based on the original stories of Professor Gunter Pooley of the United Nations University. And these stories contained more than 1,000 scientific concepts. The story is simply elements of the nature, elements of the universe. They talk to each other. And in that sense, sort of they think of the, they concentrate on science education, they enhance the system thinking within the students, within the classroom, and very much focus on the emotional intelligence. And I'm going to give you one example, one only example of a story which a seagull and a whale, they were talking to each other. They were comparing their hearts. The heart of the whale is like a big room. It pumps 3-4 times a minute. It pumps, sort of tens of gallons, sort of each time, while the seagull has a very small heart, and like, sort of a bead or something, and this heart pumps probably 300 times a minute, pumps few milliliters, but both hearts, the big and the small, have the same principles. This pump is working all the time. And what is the scientific principle about, sort of this heart working all the time? Then you go into the concept of food, and then you go into the concept of ionization of food, and then you go to the concept of polarity, and then you go to the concept of energy and how the energy, sort of being derived from the food, and this energy get the heart, sort of working all the time, and it is the same principle between, sort of all these hearts. And then from that, you could go into what are other forms of energy. They are, sort of clean energies, and they are different types of energies, and so on and so forth. So this just a small conversation between two elements in nature, sort of opens for a lot of things. There are a lot of stories like this, sort of why apples do not fly. And this is, you could go through the concepts of gravity and the concepts, sort of the even the cosmopolitan, how the universe, sort of is going around all the time. Another story, sort of walking on water, the surface tension, and so many other concepts are coming from stories as simple as this. However, one important thing during these stories, sort of we're concentrating at. And this is actually a problem in our education system. We are concerned of teaching students the principles of science, knowledge. When we teach them out of context, probably the students use them. But even if we teach them, sort of right, and we lack giving them skills. And that's why, sort of we should make the balance. But what is really lacking is putting this into the moral principles and the attitude. So the KSA system, the knowledge, skill, attitude system should be, sort of looked upon very much. Like, sort of the story of the strongest tree, very strong tree in the desert. And this tree is very vain and, sort of look at a worm with full, sees that the worm is useless. It's, sort of doing a lot of dirt and that sort of thing. But when they talk to each other, the tree realizes that the worm do a great job making small nutrients. And through the small nutrients are so light, so small, that the very small osmotic pressure that takes them within the tree until it comes, to the leaves, the nutrients could come. Without the worm, the tree, sort of could die. And that's how you appreciate, the job of every element of everybody. Whether, sort of it looks big, it looks, sort of huge, that's, sort of how to respect the difference between the elements of nature. There was, sort of a lot of work done on preparing, sort of multimedia package, sort of like the videos, sort of we have seen, the fables, sort of have been there. There was manuals for the teacher how to do this, because it was important to train teachers how to use these kits and to do them well. And there was training guide also. And there were science fact sheets. The whole thing, sort of should have the essence of science not to be missed. That was, sort of tried in several schools in Alexandria and in public libraries, and now, sort of is in Cairo. I wouldn't go through this, but the testimony of the students, they realized the beauty of science. The teachers, they found that their students are becoming, sort of more responsive, and the supervisors who realized how it is important for this system, to work through. The most striking and interesting thing, it was, sort of this academic exercise which has been done, and that was taken from a stratified sample. The students who have been learning science through the creative science education, through the stories, through that thing, have done much better compared to those who were, sort of learning via the conventional thing. If I would conclude, because the chairman has given me only 5 minutes to describe the work of 5 years, but my pseudo-wisdom, I would, sort of go through that science should be put in context. And my son was, sort of he knows about, the motor cars and the difference in the motor cars. And you could take the interest of the kids on motor cars in teaching thermodynamics and how the engines, sort of work. Or he knows about the mobile more than me, sort of you could put science in context, let the students see how science is around them in everyday life. And you need innovative approaches. If you look at the discussion between the whale and the seagull, and teach students, say, the first law of electrochemistry by Faraday, blah, blah, blah. The students will never, sort of get it in context unless, sort of he knew that, this electrochemistry gets the heart pumping and all that sort of thing. And the most important thing is the teacher. The teacher makes the difference. If you really train the teacher, that will make all the difference. And the very final and important thing that be a political will. A political will which makes the education is a project of a country. The education, everybody should be involved in the education system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharif, and we're still getting the same vibes of the need to put science in context, and our last presentation that will focus on science is by Dr. Amir Wasif, who is the advisor for international and external affairs to the president of the Egypt-Japan University for Science and Technology, which is just on the outskirts of Alexandria here, and he will discuss science and technology and education in developing countries.
Good evening, everybody. Let me underline the word developing economies. Basically, I am an industrialist. So why am I talking about education? The reason is that I have been on so many councils and so many conferences relating the links between industry and academia. And I know that I have come to realize that there is a very serious gap in this relationship. Let me first define what we mean by an economic development stage. First, if we measure the value added here with time, you will see that you will start with a factor-based economy, then you move into growth-led economy, and you see those blue lines, these are called mobility barriers. It's not easy to move from one stage to the other. You need investments, but then something different happens when you need to move into the knowledge economy, because the value added does not come from factors, does not come from land, raw materials, and it comes mainly from knowledge. So this is why I am addressing the issue of developing economies. Why is it important? If we look here, industry is located in this area, which is the factor-based economy. Egypt actually is in the middle of the development phase, and academia is catering to the needs of the innovation economy. So this gap between industry and academia in developing economies is the main difficulty. So I'll be talking about, okay, how do you measure a nation's success? What is the role of innovation in economic development, and what are the pillars of knowledge economy? And then I'm going to discuss this in the context of a new paradigm, or the new paradigms in science and technology education, and the importance of the links between academia and industry, and the peculiarities of developing economies, industry fragmentation, and the role of the government, which I believe is the crucial point here. Okay, if we want to measure the well-being, GDP was used previously to measure how a nation is developed, but not anymore. We have now the Human Development Index, which takes, among other things, economic factors, but there are, for example, in the Gross National Happiness Index that I will show you, many other factors are coming into play, not just economic factors. OECD Competitiveness Platform, the World Economic Forum, okay, this is, for example, the subjective well-being, the Gross National Happiness Index. You will notice that education figures in one position. If you look at the OECD, again, education and knowledge enhancement. Now we're moving from education to knowledge. Next, if we look at the World Economic Forum indices, 4 times education is mentioned: health and primary education, higher education and training, technological readiness, and innovation. Now we're getting somewhere. Okay, what about the 4 pillars of knowledge? You have, again, education and training, and you have information infrastructure, the economic incentives, the regimes which constitute the institutional regimes like the schools, universities, research centers, industry, and so on, and the innovation system. If we look at the relation between the knowledge economy index and the gross national income per capita, you will see that Egypt is somewhere here, which is a very low position, and the curve is way up here where you have really the economies of advanced countries or developed countries. And this is why, because there is a gap. Okay, now, how are we addressing this? Let's look at knowledge. There are old paradigms, I think Claudio talked about it, and there are old paradigms and there are new paradigms. If we look at knowledge, it used to be transferred. It used to be transferred, and now it is jointly developed. So what does this imply? It implies a lab-based, hands-on learning. If you look at the student, it was a passive vessel. It had to be filled with information, as you said. Now, no, he's an active constructor and a discoverer of knowledge, and this is how he retains the knowledge. So you need powerful learning tools, and you have the learning process. It was memorizing. Now it is development. So you have lab-based learning again. The context. You have competitive, individualistic attitudes. Now you have cooperative learning, group learning, classrooms with cooperative teams among faculty. So again, now we're talking about not lab-based learning, but project-based learning. And multidisciplinary teams. Multidisciplinary is coming very strongly now. And the diversity. You have conformity and cultural in the old school. Today it's diversity. It's personal esteem. It's cultural variations. So we're talking about humanities and social sciences. I remember being in Kyoto a couple of years ago during the STS forum, and at that time, Yamanaka received the Nobel Prize for his work on stem cells, which he was awarded a couple of years ago. And the interesting thing that he addressed everybody with, he said, I need now to be guided by people who know about ethics. Because of the magnitude of his development, he needed guidance in ethics. So he realized that humanities and social sciences are an integral part of science today. Classify and store students, that was the old paradigm. Today it's to develop the competencies. So you need personalized attention. The old method of mass producing students is not very good anymore. The epistemology, it was reductionist, facts, memorization. Today it's constructivist, meaning that you build on a powerful base of science and technology foundation. The technology, instead of drill and practice, you have problem solving, communications, collaboration, and so on. So we need to do a system thinking attitude, critical thinking, and develop soft skills. These are some of the old and new paradigms. All this points to a very important concept. My theory is that if we talk about project-based learning, lab-based learning, powerful learning aids, multidisciplinary teams, humanities, personalized attention, powerful basic science, systems thinking, critical thinking, and soft skills, we are basically pointing towards strong academia and industry links. So, to prove this point, look at the Times Higher Education classification system. You will see that industry and research and relation with industry figure twice. So academic institutions are benchmarked with two variables in the Times Higher Education classification systems. This is the old paradigm, and I have seen this so many times, and this is why I state boldly it is not working. This model, or the linear model, where academia goes to industry and says, we can solve your problem, this model is not working anymore because of the gap in industry academia positions. This is basically providing consultations, but it's not cooperation. The new paradigm now in research is basically starting with, here in the yellow triangle here, you start with sustainability through societal impact. Your problems have to be solved for society. And this is where you tackle the applied research model that is iteratively going down to the development through design capabilities of industry. And with development, you have applied research know-how from industry going here. And this will open up opportunities for the basic research to serve it. And so why do we call it iterative? Because there are small loops. It's not really a one-way street. It's always loops going around. Now, you have two very important characteristics here. First is the sustainability or the economic sustainability and viability, because we are solving societal problems that could lead to commercialization, which is a very important aspect. On the other hand, here, the role of the government, I will show you very shortly what it will be. And here, with basic research, applied research, and development, you have project-based learning, which is one of the paradigms that I talked about. So this model supports very strongly the new education method. Okay, what is so peculiar about developing economies? Lack of clear R&D strategy, we all know that. Low funding, you know that we used to spend, we spend 0.2% of our GDP on research. Now with the new constitution, it must be 1%. So in 3 years' time, we're supposed to multiply by 5, or, which is a very difficult thing if you need to spend 5 times as much on R&D. So low funding as a percentage of GDP is one of the characteristics. The Constitution took care of that. I don't know how they will do it, but anyway, it's there. No mechanism for linking R&D in academia with industry, and I mean formal mechanism. But this statement needs to be really revised, because there are some mechanisms there, but they need to be really integrated and work together. We have issues in management of research facilities. We have a brain drain problem, which everybody knows. All the good brains can leave to get better paying jobs in developed economies, unattractive salaries, and sometimes outdated laboratories. Okay, now what about the industry on the other side? They suffer from what we call fragmentation, and this is the definition of Michael Porter, the father of competitive strategy. Entry barriers are low, economies of scale are low, no experience curve, high supply chain costs, low bargaining power with suppliers, diverse product line, high exit barriers, imperfect markets, poor and lack of information, weak judiciary. If you have a problem in IP, you're in trouble. Weak markets, low income per capita, limited financial tools. And this is one of the things that really make me stop when I see people talking about entrepreneurship and encouraging young people to go into business. What they don't know is that the funding is not there, the legal system will not help them, and they will really be in very deep trouble if they try to go into business on their own within the current system prevailing in most developing economies. Okay, so what can we do about it? Well, I think the first thing we should do is encourage the government to fund what we call, or bridge the death valley, or the valley of death. What is it? If you look at this curve, this is the curve that is called the product life cycle. You start with a launch, and then the product starts to pick up and sales grow, and then you reach maturity, and then a decline, and at this point, the product dies because of disruptive innovation or any other reason. Now, if you look at the cash flows, okay, if you look at the cash flows, here is a negative cash flow until a certain point. When you are in the growth phase, you start to break even. This is the valley of death. So it spans the research, the development, the product launch, and all these steps for launching a new product, an innovative product, are bridging the valley of death. So what is the role of the government? Look at the SBIR model. The role of the government is to supply the funds necessary to bridge that, because most of the innovation comes from small and medium enterprises. The big enterprises have deep pockets. They can afford to do the R&D to bridge the valley of death. But small enterprises usually, with good innovative ideas, cannot do that unless there are programs that help them. And even in America, which is basically a very advanced state in this field, has programs for SMEs to bridge the valley of death, and it's called the SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research Program. And they finance several phases through grants, and they treat the intellectual property right that comes out of it. So basically, in conclusion, effective implementation of the new paradigm in education are strengthened by academia and industry links. Maybe we all agree. Yeah. Government plays a crucial role in promoting those links. Government should have a clear strategy to support academia and industry cooperation. Identify research priorities areas as social needs, institutionalize funding, grants of early phase and concept development, increase spending on basic research, emphasize sustainable research initiatives, strong commercialization potential is essential, and of course improve the business environment and incentives of industry so that they can implement this. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Wassef. Okay, I'll just move on directly to our next speaker, and we're shifting to a different side, I would say, of the discussion. Dr. Susanta Gunatilai from Sri Lanka. Please. Oops.
Yeah, in Sri Lanka, we perhaps think differently. So I am bridging from some of the concepts that were said earlier, information, education, and the last speakers' buzzwords of knowledge, culture, epistemology, constructiveness, social construction, and society. I should mention that these ideas were not generated in Sri Lanka, but it was generated partly in, we had a group in UNESCO called Science and Culture and the Future. So one of the places we met was in the mouth of the Amazon, in Belém, also in Florence, and also some of these things come from my work in the UN on the new technologies and social systems around the world. Okay, we were talking essentially of information to and fro. But what I'm going to talk about is that there are three information systems that are increasingly getting interconnected through the industrial systems that you are implying, and which will provide the metrics for a future global meta-information system. These information systems would include those in computers, in biological systems, and in cultural systems. So incipient now, but increasingly in the future, information in the different realms of culture, genes, and computers are and would be affecting information flows and processing in the other two realms. So genes, culture, and computers are going to get intermeshed. So if one were to consider this global meta-information system as the totality of the complex flows and processing of information in the world, then one would have to consider information in culture, genes, and computers as one totality. Synthetic biology, we heard about it yesterday, using basic blocks of life, like biobricks, different omics we heard about, and creating artificial life. But they create artificial life under cultural conditions. The culture in the lab, in the nation at large, and under religious and other norms. You can't create, or people are not creating synthetic biology in a cultural vacuum. Now, culture is information that is processed from one human mind to another human mind. So culture and biological information gets merged. If some of these ideas look strange, I have published 3 books on this in the States, which I will give the references later. Now, we also heard today that implanting chips in the brain, which is the culture processing organ. And we read last week that the new DARPA office, that's Science for Defense, I think, is merging biology and technology. That's a new project in the US. So computer systems and genetic systems merge, but under DARPA cultural conditions, maybe under an NSA culture. Who knows? So information technology using artificial intelligence is cloning parts of the mind. These computing chips, including in the future immensely powerful quantum computers, are not only in our gadgets like computers and phones, but increasingly within our own bodies and also in our environment, in the Internet of Things. Our environment today is increasingly of these information processing devices within, with, and surrounding us. Estimates of the Internet of Things, which is the interconnected computing chips that will surround us, give some very interesting figures. That within the next few years, 5 to 10 years, around 50 billion computing items around us, with which we will be communicating often unconsciously. These three information realms, the genetic, the cultural, and the digital, although nominally separate, are increasingly hybridizing themselves, merging their information stores and means of processing information. This occurs through advances in biotechnology, nanotechnology, and IT. This will have deep repercussions on all discussions of information systems writ large. For example, a scientist isolating a gene and splicing it into an existing genome, and so creating a new biological entity, is doing a cultural act. He takes cultural information, in this case, scientific information on how a gene is held together, how it can be removed and reinserted into another organism, and combines this with genetic information. So it is not only scientific information that gets merged as cultural information, but also cultural choices, such as, is it useful or desirable on medical, ethical, political, and economic grounds to introject the particular gene? Maybe a lab cannot afford it, so therefore you throw it out. Now, similarly, the digital and biological gets merged. We have seen digital and computer information gets merged. If you recall, the Human Genome Project and similar projects were so computer intensive that one has to think of it only as a partially merged system. The genome rests on banks of computers. In the opposite direction, biochips, computer chips with biological elements already built in, also results in merging. There is also an indirect form of merging, which I'm not going to go into because of time factor. Often, these mergings are not just two-way, but three-way. All three realms, the genetic, the cultural, and the computer, all three merge. For example, when work is done on many genome projects around the world, or of synthetic biology, some of the information processing is done in computers, dry, not in the wet form, because that is where the data resides. This becomes then a manipulation jointly of cultural information, digital information, and of genetic information. There are many other threefold hybrids, and fresh ones are emerging daily. If you think openly, you can come across many examples. This merging process will result in hybrid information entities populating various niches in the world. With exploding communication links, they will exchange information intensively and so constituted the emerging global network. It is the real meta-information system. Therefore, in the emerging world, there would be a multiplicity of processing and communicating nodes, not just humans. These nodes would either be one form of information, that is either cultural, genetic, or computer form, or combinations thereof, either combined into two or threefold combinations. The exchange of information across these nodes would quickly supersede those between and within human communities. Already in the digital mode, there are vast amounts of data sloshing around the globe, which rival in range those of human communication unmediated by artifacts. One example is information on computer trading. You may have heard of it. big discussions last week. Each such hybrid node would be dynamic and changing, most probably learning according to changes in their environment. Trading systems already do that. Now, this gives rise to new communicating, quote-unquote, persons. The presence of so many varieties of information processing and communication nodes will transfer the concept of a communicating person to a wide variety of cultural, biological, and digital hybrids. There are already disembodied entities online of virtual egos, avatars that one can interact with. New communicating persons will populate the world, the future. These all relate to the issue of what constitutes a community. We have considered we, humans, as a community. In a community, members communicate with other members who constitute their significant others, and thereby change their information states, leading to changes in their internal mental behavior and outward external behavior. Because of the multiplicity, a couple of minutes only, huh? Okay. Because of the multiplicity of new merged hybrid entities that would act as nodes in communication, the concept of significant other, which meant humans, will now extend beyond humans and their culture to genes and artifacts and combinations thereof. In the future, all three realms will be communicating intensely with each other. The emerging macro communication system will dwarf in quantity and intensity the existing communication modes. I'm repeating some of the stuff that I've already said. In this potent interconnected mix of communicating hybrid nodes spread around the world will develop a person's thought, a figment of his memory, a dab of paint, or a soft tune could be converted into computer information or combinations thereof. And where computing artifacts could be directly controlled by thoughts, already there are elementary systems. Thought patterns could directly be transferred in godlike fashion to life forms through computing systems. Similarly, across the entire merged system, one could have information tornadoes, so we won't go into this. So in this information world, how would we navigate? The image that arises is the jungle, say the Amazon, forest dwellers who go around and sniff around. So we will not be able to control that, but we can only sniff around and navigate ourselves. There can be other images which I'm not going to. So we translate, okay, these are the books I have written. Anybody wants to look at it in detail, given the citations. Right, and okay, one final thought. Welcome to the Frankenstein within you, within your chip, within your gene. Brief Frankensteins. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that was definitely a different way to look at things, and I'll be curious to see how that comes up in the discussion. So last but definitely not least, we should round up with a philosopher. And please, Dr. Biljana Papazova-Mann will round up the discussion from our panelists.
Oh, thank you. This is safe. Okay. You are all tired, and I'm sorry that as a philosopher, I'm coming now to bore you with principles. All the people here showed beautiful products of knowledge and of spreading of knowledge, and I'm coming with speculation. But okay, that was my destiny 2 years before, and now it's the repetition, maybe has to be so. I'm the fourth time here in Alexandria, and I'm really very happy to be here, and I know that always I'm coming home with a huge impulse to go further and to reach my thoughts, and I think that thanks the young people here, I'm motivated to go in the mystery of science, and I think that we have to learn that it's better to stay in mystery and not in the knowing. Knowing we can learn, but through the knowing we can learn differentiation. And sometimes in some talks I realize that some very important differentiation are not existing, that we confusing the technological knowledge with human knowledge, for example, and that we ignore the hierarchy of the knowledge, and in this way the hierarchy of the relevant language to this knowledge. And when I have listened the last 10 minutes from the Big Conscience Conference, I have the feeling that I am in some era of naive idealism, and we have to make the step for differentiation, the structures of the life, the structure of the soul, the way of perception, the way of imagination, and we have to mobilize ourselves for ethical imagination. That's why I appreciate very much when here the speakers have spoken about how to put science in the context, and in this way to be familiar with the knowledge which is given through nature science and to the life, and through the narrative way we can identify us with the knowledge and with our action with moral in this knowledge. And when Ismail Serageldin, the director, said yesterday in the plenary session that we are a consumer of technology and not producer of knowledge, I want to go a little further and to say we have to be maybe creator of knowledge through sharing the meaning of our life, of our destiny in the transparent way. And that's why I think that we have to make the effort to understand the past of the science, of the developing of the science in the last 300 or 400 years, and in this way to create the future, because the perception is not amorph conscious perceptions. We have to be aware very consciously how the science developed in the time from Descartes till now, how the materialistic dogmas came in the science per osmosis, and how can we try to set the spirit of the science free to make new innovation and to give meaning of our life. And I will make one gallop through my slides, but my hope idea is to stimulate ethical individualism and to make difference between self-organizing system, for example, and artificial system. And we cannot react in the way that main made products or systems give us the trends of our life. We have will and we can choose the options for our future. But to creating the future, we have to understand the past. And that's why my next slide is that despite the achievements of science and technology, we are suffering under the meaninglessness of our furious fragmented society. It's not only industrial fragmented, we are in one meaninglessness time, and my generation and the generation of my parents, they have inspiring ideals, and now your generation, the generation of my daughter, they don't have inspiring ideals, and that is a big lack for our society. You have to create, to know, to speak about this. Yes, that is the situation in the whole world, that after First and the Second World War, the technology was expanded so much and supported expected so much from governments, from different firms, that we confuse now technology with science, and the new principle, the new culture of science is not object of debate, and it's good that we here could make this effort to discuss the culture of the science and not to confuse the social progress with technological progress, not to be scared of the speed of technological progress, because we can give something against this. We can start to give meaning of our life and of our actions, and in this way to control this speed of the technological progress. Yes, without hope, no responsibility. Hopelessness is connected with irresponsibility, and the human being wants to see hope and to see concrete responsibility in his life for the mental and the whole healthy, of course. Then it's the simple wisdom is that science has not monopoly of the truth. I was in the last 2 months in LinkedIn in one discussion, is science truth or fraud? And that was, I lost 3 kilos from working and struggling with different scientists and people from different areas, because this special statute of the science is giving the more of the scientists the feeling, if they are supported with much money, they are those who have ideas, who have access to the truth of the life, and that is not so. We have to give meaningfulness in our actions. Yes, and this problem is for the scientists in principle, and we can solve this problem when we differentiate between science, omnipotent science like ideology, or sciences with concrete, different and constructive methods. If we differentiate it between me language, when me and my will are engaged in the action, and passive voice, it language, that is something very old-fashioned to speak in passive voice in the science, because it's giving again this idea that scientists have the big through, and the science and the thought is embodied knowledge from the time from Descartes, from 17th century, and we can correct this with our language. And it's not so difficult. We have to speak this up. It's good when different parts of the knowledge are coming together with young people, because it's all about you, and speak about these problems and learn to formulate questions. I think that is one very good reset to organize good questions in concrete situations, and the good inquiry is always a good tool to solution, because in our embodied knowledge or transhumanistic knowledge, the deontic knowledge, the will, are ignored. That's why it's difficult. And the last time I gave one matrix model from Horst Rittel, a very interesting systematic designer, and he has spoken about factual knowledge, what is deontic knowledge, what I want in transparent community, and then explanatory knowledge, instrumental knowledge, and at the end is coming the concept, what we want to do. Yes, we are in a time where the materialist ideology is facing a big credibility crunch, and that's why it's difficult to talk between the generation, but it appears to be so, and we have to come through. That is, there are 2 cartoons from friend of me, Bulgarian. He is satiric cartoons, and he illustrated this old problematic between the materialist and the idealist. What is the first one? And the second is this schizophrenic way when you don't know that you are at home with the nature and your viewer in the rich countries. And you can be spiritual, or the big conscience is coming in dream and you can ignore the day. That is not our way to come out from the crisis. Here it's ironized the method, the reductionist, the botanist who is thinking that with this method he can get the leaf. Here is the zoologist, the reductionist. It doesn't work too. Here we are in this situation between Descartes, 17th century. I think, therefore, I am, only the thought is interesting. I'm embodied thinker. That's very dangerous, and we have a lot of these scientists today. And then is Baudrillard, the philosopher from France. When Descartes say, I think, therefore I am, the Baudrillard say, on contrary, I consume, therefore I am. That is what Sarah Gelding taught yesterday. Here I'm appealing about genuine ethical individualism. And the first step to go in this direction is to make questions which are in the context, science in the context of life, in the context of generation, in the context of concrete people. And yes, I think that your generation has no other chance. You are not more allowed to be shy. You have to want, because wanting is the most beautiful thing of the freedom. You have to speak up your needs and your ideas and how you imagine your future. Because the will can be stimulated through individuals and then politic will, and only the will can bridge the past to the future, which opens the avenue for creative future, creative science. Let's do it. And at the end, I'm a big fan from Rupert Sheldrake. I don't know if you know him. And his last bestseller was Science Set Free. In America and in England, in UK, the same book has the title A Science Delusion, as answer from Richard Dawkins' God Delusion. And it's very interesting. I recommend it very hardly, this book. We'll try to translate in Arabic even. But here, it's he's a biologist and philosopher, and it's very interesting, controversial spirit of our time. Is incredible person. And here, in a very good form, are given the 10 dogmas which are smuggled in the science in the time from Descartes till now. And in the end of every chapter are given already questions. How can we discuss and how can we solve the good substance of the science from the ideological materialistic osmosis? I recommend this book. And here I try to summarize something from him, something from me, topics for discussions. We can read this. Maybe already we read the first three. Then about the brain researchers, it's very important to break with the taboos and to open themselves about the personal experience and not to be isolated from tradition and other people. And then, of course, it's very important to find money, to find supporters who are interested in new questions and vital questions, and destiny questions and future questions, and to try with the science to find a new way for better future. Thank you.
Thank you, Biljana. Chief, can you please step up to the panel? Okay, we have time for a few questions, and we're running a bit late because we started late, but I think we can take at least a couple of questions if anyone has any questions or points you would like to make. Oh, yes, please go ahead. Can you just please introduce yourself first?
Okay. Angel Nim, immunology PhD student at university. I want to ask Dr. Sharif.
Raise your voice a bit so we can all hear you.
Angel Nim, immunology PhD student at university. I want to ask Dr. Sharif about is there any vision in the new upcoming years to replace our old methods of education, which depend on study by heart? In Egyptian expression, حفظ الصم, that all Egyptian students suffered during their study years. By your new modified method, which I am really impressed with, I will thank you about your hard work. And if it exists, I wanted to ask, is there any steps taken or any fund or cooperation with some big organizations that can we put it particularly in on floor to be a system in our schools soon? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. You have asked a very, very important and interesting questions. Were we going only to do an experiment, or was there a plan to make it national? Actually, there was a plan. And interestingly enough, I would say Abdeslam al-Mahgoub, the Alexandria governor, he decided to start the experiment in all schools in Alexandria. And that was, sort of the step to go forward and to do it, because the results which I have shown you, it was, sort of done on an experiment which included included 15,000 students, which they take grade 5, grade 8, and grade 11. 5 ابتدائي، تانية إعدادي، تانية ثانوي. Okay? And this, sort of showed that the students, this was the result I showed you, sort of was the students on the 5th grade. So the question, the answer to your question, yes, there was a plan to go national. Why we didn't go national? Because one of the things I have said, there was no political will. Actually, the Minister of Education, in the middle of his strategic plan, سنة 2010 بالضبط, in the middle of the strategic plan, the year 2010, he was, sort of asked to leave office. That's okay. A minister could change, but strategy should not change. What happened? The new minister who came, he decided, sort of that he has nothing to do. The random walk? Exactly the random walk. If everyone, sort of goes his own way, and then at the end, we find that ourselves, that we are stepping at the same thing. Your question about the budget, I actually talked to Ahmed Bahgat, okay? And I told him, I wish one day, as we see الكورة في dream, we see العلم في dream, we see science in dream. And that was, again, once more, we need that science and science understanding and science education will be a project of a nation. This will take time. The question is, we have here a very philosophical question. Well, people here are not interested in science. Look at the room here, and look, sort of the previous session, which people were talking about, sort of perception and thing. There was, sort of much more people who are interested in science are less. But shall we create the sort of understanding and appreciation of science, and then we will find that there is, so a big room for it. Well, here the question is for you, all of you, to answer. Thank you.
She's saying it's a political problem that ended. So.
Oh, yes. Oh, we have a political problem, and we are even living now, so a more severe political problem. Yes. Yes, political will, sort of to get science and to lead this country, sort of on a scientific basis, it is not there.
Yes, can we take this question here and then here, please?
Okay. Firstly, I appreciate these innovative and creative methods in education, like the video Professor Katia viewed. Okay, but I want to ask if the facing difficulties in learning may fix the information. By the mean, the baby or the kid, when he just says a movie or he take his tablet or iPad just for see a video, it's very easy. He face it as a game, as a play. But if he face difficulties and read and he take a time to reach the information, it may fix in his mind, okay? Like the others, all the scientists here in Egypt, they faced a lot of difficulties to learn, okay? It's,
yes, please. It's okay, like this now. Just need to press that button.
Okay. Really, this is a problem. So when the student, the children, the youth, the adolescent, he's in face of his cell phone or his tablet, he's not only, it's not amazing only, it's not something to joke. There is a process, a mind process when you deal with your tablet or with your cell phone that is important for the acquisition of knowledge. What we have to do, maybe what we can, and Mohammed will certainly do the general conclusion of this table. We see of this round table, we see that there is a huge necessity of investing in education, formation, and I add communication to have a good and efficient science in our day by day. Because we need science. Science is present in our everyday life. Science is present. We need it. We need it to have quality of life. We need science to progress. We need science to be better citizens. But to achieve this knowledge, we need education, formation, and communication. And to bridge, and many of my colleagues said, the bridge, we have to bridge this knowledge of one other and the other to have a better life. And have a better life is so simple, but we have to try to have this, to discover this formula where we add education, formation to achieve science and life quality. You see?
Sharif, please go ahead.
Could I add one sentence to that? Actually, what you were asking for is exactly the contrary, what we should do. We should make people, so to believe that science is simple and it's not so far away, and they need to work so hard to understand it. They can take it easily, they can understand easily, they can appreciate it easily. And our way is to try to make it easy and to communicate it for them.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you.
They misuse this technology. Like in our schools, where they apply using tablets in school.
Everything could be misused, so we should do it the right way.
But I think we firstly may teach them how to use the new technology. I think it's firstly we need it.
Because, can we just move on to one more question, because I think we need to leave the room very quickly. Can we take your question? And you can, I mean, all the panelists are available afterwards if you want to grab anyone to have a further discussion with. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, first.
I'm sorry, the gentleman here will go first.
Okay, first I wanted to thank all the panel for the wonderful presentations.
I'm sorry, I meant the gentleman at the front.
I'm sorry.
He had his hands up.
I misunderstood that.
Apologies.
Are you sure? If he doesn't mind.
Okay, please.
Okay. My question is to Dr. Amir Bosif. I'm Wael Muhammad. I'm the founder and executive manager of STEP Foundation, which is a newly under establishment organization that stands for Science and Technology Entrepreneurship Platform. I understood from your presentation, which was very informative, that you are an industrialist. So, and I come from a scientific and research background. So, my first question: how would you propose to fill the gap that you mentioned earlier between the industry and the academia, especially in the atmosphere of distrust? There's no mutual trust between the two sectors. They're totally isolated. And let's say people already try to, you specifically mentioned that we, academia, we can solve your problems. This strategy doesn't work anymore, so what alternative do you propose? And my second thing is, I noticed that your recommendations were all subjected to the government, and this makes me feel like we're the majority here. We're the youth. We're coming. We're going to be the next policymakers, inshallah, hopefully. So should we wait until everything is fixed so we can move on, or we should have to try to go into the valley of death and die one time and the other until we learn how to become survivors? So what would you advise young researchers and entrepreneurs in my generation? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your very interesting questions. Actually, to answer your first question, how do we bridge the gap between academia and industry? I wouldn't call it distrust. It is just a different focus. The industry is focused on a stage of development that is not met by academia. And because of fragmentation, the problems are so numerous that academia does not have the necessary resources to solve all these problems. So what I'm suggesting is a concentration of efforts. I'm not saying that we rely on the government only, but the government in many places has been instrumental. And as our colleagues said, it's the political will. There must be a plan. There must be a political will. When John Kennedy in 1959 said we will put a man on the moon before the decade is over, that was a government commitment. You have integrated circuits because of this. Apollo went to the moon using a 64K computer. Today you have gigabytes in your pocket. So all this is a result of government programs. They bridge the gaps. I'm not saying this is the only way to do it, but if we need to bring academia and industry together, there must be a cooperation plan between the small and innovative companies that are cash poor through funding that bridges this gap in research that is targeted towards solving problems of society. So this is basically what needs to be done. There are other ways. The political will is very important, and there must be a plan. It must be led by societal benefits to ensure sustainability. It's commercialization of research. Otherwise, most of the research that has been done is to satisfy the curiosity of the researcher, and the research ends up in a drawer somewhere because there is no practical and economic way to extract sustainability and economic sustainability especially. So basically, I think this is to answer your first question. In addition to all sorts of other programs, there must be a government-led initiative to help in bridging this gap through initial stage funding, We are there. There are some, I cannot say we're not there. We are there, but it needs to be within a grand strategy. I have worked on several issues based on this, and I think that with time, you as youth should start pressuring the decision makers into complying with societal needs. The second question was?
I think you answered both of the questions, I think.
Okay.
Well, I sincerely apologize. We will have to wrap up now. We're already late, and I think they need the room, so we might have to leave very quickly. Just to wrap up, I think obviously from the panelists, from the experiences shared, we obviously cannot ignore teaching science, but we do need to change how we approach teaching science. And going on from your comment, it's not really just about providing tablets or iPads to children. We obviously need more funding, and funding will always be a problem, but funding alone, I don't think, will solve the problem. You have to use that funding to change the material being used, the context is being used, how you deliver the information. We've heard from TV shows to stories, to fables, and there's so many different approaches. It's just not about pumping more money in the system. And if anyone has been following what happened last year with the science research budget in Egypt, you would know it's not just about money. It's about actually knowing how to use the money effectively. So with that, I would just like to thank our panelists and thank you for attending. And if you have any questions, I'm sure they will be available to answer them. Thank you.